What is up, and welcome to That Crafty Gamer. With March coming to an end, I decided to make a bit of luck by casting a 4-leaf clover. So, to get started, I found a photo of a clover I really liked and traced that onto a piece of cardstock. After darkening the outlines, I cut the clover out. Once I had the stencil cut out, I used it to mold clay to make a master copy of the clover. I worked the clay together and used a normal rolling pin to flatten it out. I rolled it to get a nice thickness, 1/4 of an inch to be precise, and keep it even. I then used the stencil to cut out the initial shape of the clover in the clay. Once I had the basic shape of the clover laid out in clay, I used the silicone-tipped sculpting tools to clean up the appearance. Once I got the shape I liked, I baked the clover in the oven. After the bake and a bit of cooling off, I could place the clay clover in a casting box and pack it down with casting sand. Before I put the sand over the clover, I coated it in baby powder. I made sure to get all the edges and corners. This keeps the sand from clinging to the clay when I remove it later. I also add a layer of baby powder in the casting box to make sure that the sand doesn't stick to the surface below. For the first layer or two, I push the sand through a metal strainer. This is to thin the sand out in order to get as much detail as possible in the casting process. I then pack down the first 2 layers very gently. Once I got it packed enough, I started packing the box without straining the sand first. After I finished packing that side of the box with sand, I flipped it, added the second half of the box, and began the packing process all over again. After all the packing was done, I removed the two sides of the box and created two separate trenches. I simply used a screw to create the tunnels. One tunnel is where you pour, while the other is where the metal rises. After I got the pour basin and riser done, I carefully removed the master copy of the Clover. I then put the box halves together and fastened them using two screws. And then you're ready to cast. For the casting process, I decided to use brass that I had left over from another pour. I lit my foundry and got a crucible with the brass inside up to melting point. When it had turned to liquid, it was time to pour. After it had properly cooled, it was time to open up the box. Although it wasn't the best casting I've gotten, I knew I could still do something with it. First, I cut off the excess brass using a rotary tool with a diamond cutting wheel. Then I used the same tool to roughly shape the Clover. Once I got it to a decent shape, I headed over to the sander. I shaped it slowly but surely from grits 120 to 320. I sanded the face of one side as well. Before I went any further, I added a hole in one of the leaves, just in case I wanted to hang it. I then sanded it by hand, unfortunately, because I was taking a little too much off with the sander. So I went from 400 grit and climbed all the way to 3000. I sanded with dry sandpaper for the 3000 grit, and when that was all done with, it was time to finish it off with a polish.